Episode 41? 41? Yeah, episode 41, Exit Liquidity. We got Token Brice from the
Hello.
DeFi Collective here.
Thanks for having
Thanks for
me.
coming on.
Welcome.
Welcome. All right. I'm not even going to try to introduce the collective. We've read up on it a bit, but I'm going to let you explain that. But first, we want to hear a bit about you, your intro into the space, a little bit about your background, and how you got started with the collective.
Sure. Yeah, collective is a bit of a weird beast, so I don't blame you. So about me, I've been involved in DeFi since it pretty much started to be called that about 5-6 years ago now. First, I was just a curious, passionate, let's say. I very quickly started to share and write about it. And imagine one of my big achievement in the space was actually, right there, on the side, this, DeFi Friends. So DeFi Friends is a community we created with a few colleagues in France to essentially help people learn about DeFi in their own language, so in French, as the name would suggest. And the vision was really to bring together the people that were already working in the space. There were very few back then, but also the loads of people that were curious about DeFi, to help them onboard it with content and discussions in French, and kind of remove that language barrier of English, which was very prevalent back then and is still quite a thing today. After that, I got involved with a few projects, including Monolith, a crypto debit card paired with a smart contract wallet. Really cool tech, but it didn't get so much traction, sadly. I helped the Paraswap DEX aggregator with a token and DAO launch, setting up the early governance processes. And I guess most people came to know me more at the later stage, when I contributed to Liquidity for about 18 to 19 months, helping them with a broad range of topics, but the main ones being awareness, adoption of LUSD in DeFi, and a lot of governance-related work to make sure LUSD, as a stablecoin of the protocol, is supported all across DeFi, and the overall liquidity strategy on the LUSD and LQTY tokens.
Awesome. And your choice of kind of really going hard at Liquidity, where did that kind of come from? What was the decision making behind that?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty funny because it was the most obvious application I've ever done for working at a company, because I saw they were looking for back then head of growth, which I ended up not being such a good head of growth in the common sense of them, but I found my other missions I was good at. So yeah, in this application, it was pretty funny because I discovered Liquidity almost a year before this application was offered, and I submitted my candidacy to it. And by then I already had produced quite a bit of content about Liquidity. I was talking about that a lot. So, it's like, how do you know Liquidity? Well, I've been shilling you guys for about a year. Okay, can you show us example of your previous book? Yes, sure. Here's an article about Liquidity that explains the whole protocol in 2 languages. Here's a 2-hour video where I talk about Liquidity. Here's an interview where I talk about Liquidity. It was like I was doing the job before I was already in the job. So it was just very aligned, I would say. And
Yeah.
I guess we get to it with the collective too. But I've been quite opinionated, let's say, with my involvement in DeFi, where I do think DeFi overall is great and amazing, but there are, it's a very broad umbrella that can cover a wide range of different realities. And I believe, some of them are worth talking about and spending the time to understand and support. Others are more what we could describe as fad, that I don't see standing the test of time.
Awesome. And the show is called Exit Liquidity. So the question, of course, is, do you have any moments along that journey where you might have been Exit Liquidity?
Oh yeah, I mean, we all go through that phase, right? Your friends are not your exit liquidity, they say, but it happens a lot. Yeah, I mean, I made some mistake when I was discovering DeFi. I've been the exit liquidity of a few people. I've learned to avoid such opportunities. But yeah, I guess I don't know. You want specific example? I have to share publicly my failures. Or...
Yes. That's the opportunity for this. Just one to
Yeah,
kind of highlight your credentials, your badges of honor.
I see. So I have this pattern where I play those games right, but then I get overconfident because I'm playing the game right, and I do stupid things as I go. So, like for instance, there was this ARM fork on Polygon called Klima,
Yeah.
which had all the wind in its back to be a good big fat pump, and I kind of anticipated it from the pre-sale. So I was well positioned. As it was going through and the excitation was spiking up, I was sitting on Uniswap V3, making very nice LPs that were collecting insane amount of fees. So I was actually, the others were my exit liquidity at first. I was doing pretty good. Collected tons of fees, but I still kept a fair share of the Klima position for some reason. And yeah, then I guess I became the exit liquidity of others because I was just holding and grabbing this. It was an ARM fork, so like insane yield, but the token just went. And it took me a while to realize that there were no end to the dump inside. So last part of the bag was really poorly sold.
It's an interesting one, I think. I don't think we've had one. Usually the stories go that you do really well early on and then it comes back to bite you. But I think this is the first time we've had someone who kind of had the script flipped on them where you were actively dumping on people and then it kind of came back to bite you. But I guess that's part of the game.
A part of the game, yeah. It's PvP. You just need to be on the right side of the sword, and sometimes you take the sword in the face.
Yeah, sometimes. Too many times in some cases. I want to shift over to the collective before getting like too deep into what you guys are doing or what you guys are aiming to do and your values. I'm curious as to like where the idea for this came up, where the idea came from. Like, when did you first think of this?
Yeah, it's been a very long story, but it was about roughly a year ago. So when I was still working with Liquidity, and it's kind of stemming from question people sympathetic to the cause, I would say, would ask us is like essentially what can we do to help Liquidity and help more protocols like Liquidity emerge, and we often found ourselves answering that. Well, essentially, the best thing for Liquidity would be for more protocols to its level of resilience to exist, and especially more stablecoin, as we could do interesting things with them. And I guess from that answer, we were giving quite often this idea emerge of, okay, so what can we do to actually support immutable protocols and foster an ecosystem where more resilient protocols are built, and it's essentially easier for builder to try to maximize the autonomy and resilience of their protocol. So it would be a bit of the starting point, I guess, about January last year.
January, that was when you guys first had the idea, and what did the journey kind of look like between then and now? Because I think, as far as I remember, like we haven't seen anything on you guys anywhere online until maybe like a week or two ago. So
Yeah,
what
we've been
happened
pretty
in that
discreet.
time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it took quite a while to figure out essentially what's the best way to structure this, how it could actually work, because it's a nice idea to support immutable protocols, but you need the idea to be viable, and also just to find the people that were willing to commit in this adventure, because from the start I understood that it was much bigger than myself. So yeah. So those months were mostly spent as figuring that out. So figuring out that essentially the best status for us would be a non-profit association, and then kind of going around the potential jurisdiction we could fall into to conclude that Zug in Switzerland was actually a good fit for us, and finding colleagues to join me on this adventure that had a very synergetic skills with mine, and also equally value aligned. That was probably the hardest part, to be honest. because we have a lot of people that are competent in crypto, that is for sure, but a lot of them are more individualistic, let's say, or not too focused on the long term of the space. So yeah, we needed a bit of time to make sure everyone was seeing the same things behind, high quality DeFi or whatever we call it.
Yeah, and so jumping straight into it, what is the collective, and how do each of those members that you mentioned in the community overall contribute to the larger goal?
Yeah, sure. So at a high level, the collective, as I was saying, is a non-profit association incorporated in Zug, Switzerland, with the purpose of supporting decentralized finance and especially the most resilient, trustless, autonomous protocol. So just before we go into how we do so, let's just dive a little bit in that, because I guess it's important. So at least for us internally, it was a lot of work to, and we're still working on it, to establish a protocol guideline essentially as to what type of protocol we want to support. We've came up with a pretty satisfying term recently. So we talk about critical protocol, mission critical DeFi protocol. And it's a nod to mission critical software that you will find, for instance, software running, autopilots in plane or various things, essentially in situations where you cannot afford failure, because if there is failure, there are dead bodies because of your software. So those software, even think about the software in your car, for instance. From the outside, they seem very old and rudimentary. You're like, why is my car so stupid? In terms of, the Tesla know a bit better, but the experience is not as good as your iPhone, for instance. But because also they follow a very different development method, essentially, a development process where there are a lot of redundancy and backup built in to really make sure that this software likelihood to fail is as low as possible, and if it fails, then there is a backup to still fulfill base amount of function that the software is supposed to fulfill. And then if the backup has any issues, there is another redundancy, and so on. So we really like this image, this metaphor, because this is the type of DeFi protocols we want to promote, type of protocols that are able to resist all market conditions and are really built with resilience in mind. And at the end of the day, it's a completely different development process than the one of a regular protocol. Especially, we'll probably touch about it later, especially for immutable protocols, are kind of the gold standard of that. And because of their code immutability, they have to take even more precautions in the development process and regular protocols. So that's for the scope as to what we want to support. I guess I should touch on a headliner before I go further, which is the way we support them is completely spontaneous and without asking for any compensation, payment, or support, simply because the collective is self-financed and autosufficient, and so able to appoint itself on the project deemed the most interesting, and it doesn't go the other way around. So there is no hiring the collective or buying the collective services. It's really more a given protocol matches the collective guidelines, which lead to the collective self-appointing itself to support the given protocol.
And you spoke about the members that you've initially chosen that kind of align with that. Can you break those down and kind of how people that are watching right now might be able to contribute as well?
Sure. So yeah, I guess we can do members and the how at the same time, because it's quite tied together. So it's essentially a triumvirate, as I like to call it, because we're three founding board members of the collective, and each have its own expertise and is championing a given area within the collective. So I've talked a bit about myself enough, but just so we can move to the other. On my end, I've been quite involved in DeFi for a while, and especially in liquidity management and governance. So those are the two areas I champion for the collective. So, providing advisory and resources to the projects we have to help them better the liquidity strategy. And same thing at the governance level, but also actually executing some of those tasks directly, you know. So that's kind of the vision of the collective, is to not just be just talking, but also active on chain with its wallets to support the project. We walk the talk essentially. So that's the area I handle. And then I have Niels Bundy, first colleague, that is more the technical arm of the collective. He's a protocol architect with 4 to 5 years experience building and advising protocol as to how to optimize the technical infrastructure. And so the mission he will be spearheading for the collective are more research focused. So we have this vision of furthering the research of any field that is relevant to builders of immutable protocol. We could actually dive into that later because it's a fascinating area and not too well known, not often discussed in podcast and such. And the third member of the board of our triumvirate is Florian Pronter. And Florian is a lawyer by training. And so he is the one that first was of immense help to figuring out, you know, the actual process of setting up the collective, what is the best jurisdiction, and so on. And externally to the project we support, is providing advice on the matter, but also spearheading an angle we call self-policing for the collective. And there's this idea of, those protocol guidelines I mentioned earlier that we use internally to decide which protocol we support. We realize there is an external outcome for these two, which is, I guess the end game would be at the regulator level, to help them differentiate between the different flavors of DeFi and make sure that the protocol that are within our guidelines are actually recognized even at the legal level as autonomous, trustless, and so on, and don't fall into applications that wouldn't really fit the nature. So that's like the main angles, essentially. We have a few more that are maybe just to be exhaustive, as this vision also of education. So, the protocol we support, we kind of have our own little media arm when we're starting. So it's very small for now, but, we intend to provide resources, content, and so on to help people understand why are those protocols interesting to us, and also explicit more as to how we support them and the various things we are achieving and delivering for those protocols. And the last one is more, we call it integrations and networking. And this is idea of having a keen eye for all integration and composability between the protocol we support. So, this idea of densifying the network of the protocol we support to eventually reach a state where when we do activities to promote one of the protocol, it's kind of promoting all the others because they are integrated and collaborating in all relevant ways.
Gotcha. Okay. definitely a lot to unpack there. When I first came across the different areas that you'll support a given project, or the kind of methodology you use, I was kind of curious about, you mentioned self-policing and then obviously governance. Sorry, did something just pop up on my screen? Did anyone else just see that? Okay, never mind. There was some icon there. That was weird. Sorry. So for those two, I think in the long run, especially when dealing with immutable projects, there's trade-offs that have to be made. I think that are some more controversial than others. So you mentioned regulatory stuff. I think right now most people are kind of on the same side within DeFi, but I think as that progresses, there'll be more of a division. But something like making trade-offs when it comes to decentralization, whether or not it's a good idea to focus on being more decentralized or focus on being more scalable, or something like outlook on RWAs, LSD dominance, the whole Lido debate, all that stuff going on. When it comes to making decisions on issues that are more controversial, I think, that are less like clear cut and dry. How do you guys go about that process? And do you guys anticipate facing any difficulty throughout that? Like, is there some issues that you still think you'll have trouble addressing?
So at the regulatory level, you mean?
Well, regulatory was just one example. I'm speaking more with regards to just issues that need to be decided on a governance level, on a self-policing level, that aren't exactly clear what the right way forward is.
Yeah,
Like, you guys have like a framework for how you think about that?
Yes. So we actually right now we work with an internal framework, and we're looking to involve the community quickly in refining it further. It will probably take at least a few more weeks, so we have something and a process we can structure the conversation with a little bit. But even at the regulatory level, so giving you a bit of alpha here because it's just like hot from the press 30 minutes ago. But I was discussing with Florian today, so our in-house legal champion, and he was telling me that essentially right now in Switzerland there is quite a bit of discussion around DeFi. It started to pick up, and there've been a bit of quite a few very negative publication on the topic, especially when it comes to issue related to liquidity management. So, for instance, we're looking into how we can jump into that conversation and really help the various stakeholders understand really what a liquidity providing is, and hopefully shine a better light on this and help them understand it at a technical level. Because it seemed right now they were really talking about a Uniswap V2 style of liquidity. So, how we were doing things 5 years ago, and they haven't had any update on how things are done since. So, we hope we'll be able to provide a more informed technical perspective in the discussion and stem it towards a better end.
Interesting. So are you guys actively like speaking with or helping I guess like policymakers in Switzerland to understand these problems?
Oh, it's a bit early to go as far. So Raider would be looking at least to maybe produce some resources that could help drive the conversation, and eventually we'll get in touch. But we see our angle more at a field of expertise on the topic. There are other associations that are already in touch with the regulator and trying to do things at this level. So we're trying more to work with them to supply them with resources and expertise. And we're not exactly champions at having a seat at the table and things like that. And I think there are again other associations that are already more established doing that, like we have ADAN in Europe, for instance. There are a few others active across the world. So it would be more in the perspective of working with them to help them provide a satisfying response to any regulation that might come out of this discussion.
Yeah, your guys' the whole ethos kind of sits around immutability and decentralization. What are kind of some of the big barriers to fulfilling that you guys see yourselves coming across in the next few years? Are there certain protocols or mechanisms that are happening in DeFi that you kind of want to knock out early, like drive people like away from Lido and the LSTs world, or are there any other worlds that you guys are targeting within DeFi in general? Hello?
Oh yeah, sorry, I got a bit of a lag, but I think I'm back now.
Yeah,
Can you
did you
scroll
hear me?
back 15 seconds? Yes.
Yeah.
For most part.
Any like in the next few years, you guys are aligned with some core decentralization and immutability issues. Where do you see yourselves like kind of being active in the most? What problems are you guys most willing to try and solve with the collective and with the power that you guys will eventually have?
Yeah, so we really see it as a kind of a ramp up of different activities, some of which can have a more immediate impact, and some of which we kind of need to plant the seeds, grow the trees, and maybe we'll be able to be more impactful on those areas in the coming months or years. So amongst the one with the most immediate effect, and the one I'm personally championing, is the theme of liquidity management for immutable projects and other protocols we support. Because essentially what happened is, to put it simply, protocols that are not too keen about their own resilience and also very aggressive in their tokenomics, they tend to have more resources to promote themselves. So, we're talking about those 5-6 digits API at launch that people are now getting used to for a given DeFi protocol. This is, in terms of marketing, let's put it like that, a good practice because it works. You will get aping in and quite a bit uptrend of TVL, and you might gather attention in the process. But over the long term, it's, as we've all seen, it's not very sustainable. And we end up with protocols that are kind of rotating very quickly and overall not portraying the best image of what DeFi could deliver. On the other end, the protocols that are maximizing for other metrics like their resilience and try to have a tokenomics that is more balanced and transparent, what they end up being quote unquote boring for the user, because it's not exactly what excites them. It's not, they won't be able to get those very attractive APIs at first. And so we see it really as an incentive misalignment, essentially, where builders, at least some of them, are attracted to the dark side, if I may put it like that, because it's just more rewarding and especially more quickly. And we see the collective as a bit of a counterforce to that trend, where by providing our support spontaneously to the one on the most resilient side of the spectrum, we can evening the incentives in that matter.
And you talked about kind of providing your support. Could you dive into exactly what that would look like from that first protocol you choose?
Sure. So, to keep on the topic of liquidity management, I guess, since we touched on it, would be essentially, for instance, the collective is controlling a sizable amount of what we call liquidity driving positions. So those are the tokens similar to the Curve token, for instance. When they are locked, you're able to direct the weekly incentives to pools of your choosing. So this enables us, for instance, to support projects that emit a stable coin or an ETH derivative or a liquid staking token of ETH. We can support that liquidity directly by essentially directing incentives to their pool, helping them grow the amount of liquidity available on their token, which then facilitates onboarding and offboarding for the user, where they can get better prices, less slippage, attract bigger user because now they can actually buy or sell the token without moving the price too much. And so that's one of the area we would be working on, and I think the one with the most immediate impact. I believe we'll have results to share on the matter way before the end of the year, for instance, for the first handful of projects we support.
I'm curious as to if there's any, are there any like names you can share as to who you guys are targeting supporting from day one, or anyone in specific you're like really excited for?
Or who you're going to war with, basically, as well.
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, we have already shared a few. So we're essentially looking right now to have, I talked about those guidelines. Those are the overall frame of our activity. But we also have a challenge, a goal of demonstrating the viability of the collective as a project. And so on top of those guidelines, we're being mindful about the impact we can have on the various projects we support. So to be a bit more explicit, so everybody kind of follows me, a project like Uniswap is extremely resilient, will be operating as long as the Ethereum network synchronizes. But Uniswap also has 3 billion TVL in their contract and already processes 50% of the DEX volume. So there is little we can do for this beautiful pony, essentially. So we're looking into, targeting projects that are ideally at the level of resilience of Uniswap, but that haven't found as much success and attention in the DeFi crowds yet. So they include quite a bit of various protocol, but if you want names, I could give you a few. For instance, one we have on our radar, and we're looking into how to best support in a short time frame, is a protocol called Cat in the Box that is currently offering what is the most resilient solution to leverage stake ETH, and has quite a limited traction. It's about, I don't know, a few thousand ETH in the protocol right now. So we're looking into what we can do for them and help them, attract more TVL to the protocol. Again, by the mean we were just talking about, supporting liquidity on the ETH derivative, for instance, the box is, and a few other things. But for all these things, we're trying to work with the protocol, synchronize with them as much as possible, because it's the building team of the protocol, I mean. So it takes a bit to set up a proper plan. But again, we really want to have maximum impact. So like the vision of, ends targeting your protocol because it's relevant, and then out of the box, shooting firepower at it, and it takes off. I will get to there, but it will take a few more months, I think. Right now, we're more, in close touch with the protocols we intend to work with, and really trying to identify what are the most impactful activities we can have. And I guess to feed you a little bit more on the protocols that we're looking to support. There are quite a few authors that are relevant, and people who follow Twitter can easily spot them. So we've already done, on another completely different vertical, quite a bit of things with Tiva, an upcoming liquid staking derivative for Ether that is in a pre-launch phase currently. And same thing here, we're synchronizing with them to see what we can do and essentially be involved from the very launch of the protocol. On other protocols that are already live, that would come to no surprise that we're also looking at liquidity and what we can do there to support LUSD and keep growing the liquidity and so on. There are quite a few not live yet protocol, but coming soon, that we're looking to support from the get-go. And those include another stable coin that is quite promising called Diet Stable. And that would be one also we'd be likely to work closely with. We keep an eye on interesting protocols developing, or being announced. So just last week, for instance, Morpho Blue was announced. Immutable, permissionless, autonomous solution for money market, essentially. So same here, we are in touch and looking into what we can do there to help them succeed.
Awesome. Yeah, lots of great names there. We just spoke to Joey from Diet last week on Exit Liquidity. Me and Cedo were talking about getting an NFT and managing some capital there as well, trying to just like accumulate points over time. Just given that it's still so early. I'm wondering I guess the liquidity management component and in most cases the governance component as well. Both of these are like revenue generating activities, but given that the collective is intended to be a nonprofit, what happens with that revenue, with those profits? Does it get directly reinvested back into the collective? Is it used to incentivize anyone in any way, or what's the plan there?
Yeah, so plan is pretty straightforward. Essentially, indeed, those liquidity driving activities are profitable. And that's also, for the long-term growth of the collective, that's an important thing to us, because it's we really want to create this positive flywheel to support those protocols. It means essentially all means must be growing all the time. Like the colony never stops growing, essentially. In terms of what are done with those profit, the collective has some expenses. We have post box we need to have to be able to have our association status. We have contributors and board members that are compensated, although they accepted way below market rate for the service they provide. So that's kind of the first area of expense. But it seems that from the very cycle of activities of the first months of operation, we already be over the self-sufficient threshold. So meaning those revenues are higher than our operating expenses. And so then the surplus, as we call it, is used to further grow the treasury, allowing us to have more means to support the protocol. And then we'll have essentially a policy regarding, the amount of surplus we're looking to settle around. And depending on that, we'll make decisions regarding onboarding more contributors to the collective, for instance, or engaging into more expenses. I guess that's a precision that is useful to have. We will be sharing publicly about our treasury management activities and the result. The only thing is to kind of preserve our alpha. We've given ourselves this principle of sharing with a 1 month delay, just so that there could be no free riding by retro engineering or liquidity strategies.
I see. That's a good thing you thought of that. That was probably one of the next questions. For what you see missing right now, what do you see missing in this ecosystem that the DeFi collective will bring? And where do you see the ecosystem and the collective in the next few years?
Yeah, I think what's missing is more opinionated, self-funded, self-sufficient endeavor like the collective. I'm truly surprised that with the amount of millionaires and billionaires crypto has printed, we see close to none of them actually kind of going on a mission like we're doing with the collective. Trying to build something that is really for the long-term benefit of the space. For me, it's a bit of an evidence, it's I gained a lot from the space as I grew into it, and it's kind of my way of giving back. And it's a similar perspective shared by the other board members. But I guess that would be a bit of a call to action to the other people, that have been served well by DeFi and crypto. It's okay, you got your vacation in the Bahamas or whatsoever, you bought your $25 million mansion, right? You had fun, you have 3 Lambos or whatsoever, all good. But no, maybe it's time to actually get involved and do something to give back to the space overall, and make sure that it wasn't just a way for you to get to financial ease, but it can also be something that benefits society as a whole in the long term.
Yeah, I think that was well said. There's not nearly enough giving back that goes on. Like, I know we're like a financially driven industry when it comes down to it, but I think that it's really refreshing to hear someone who recognizes like how not only how powerful this stuff is, but how much it's given to you, to us, to everyone in the space, and to be aware of the fact that it's to be aware of the fact that it also needs help to some extent, and we have to be willing to give back to it at a certain point. It would be nice to see more of that, but I think it would be optimistic to say that's that there's a lot of you guys out there, unfortunately, even though it's definitely needed. I want to talk a little bit about your community, or I guess like what your community could be in the longer run. How do you guys envision your, I guess, like the ants contributing to the collective? How, like, if somebody watching is interested in your mission, how can they get involved? What would they get out of being involved? I guess why they should be involved in the first place. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah, it's a good question. We haven't really touched on it yet. So in the current early phase, we're looking for value alignment before everything else. So you will get nothing out of your involvement apart from the satisfaction of helping to push DeFi towards a better end. Compensation and contribution can come later on the table, but first you'll have to demonstrate that you are really in here for the long run and because you believe in the mission. So it's kind of the phase we are at now, in the sense that we're looking to onboard various people to contribute with their own skill, and it doesn't have to be technical or related to liquidity management or whatsoever. We have quite a handful of people already that provided their help on topics ranging from helping us get some media interview, for instance, or setting up the Discord, or providing an interesting solution to help us track and report on our treasuries. Really like a broad range of topics. And so at the current stage, we are really like letting people come in, if they want to contribute, we really help them to figure out how they can do so. And we're trying to recognize those people. We have a special status on our Discord. We call them the friend. And it's done with a bit of a longer perspective of how the association is structured and how it will evolve. So currently, the association only has 3 members, which are the board members, the founding members. And we are looking to 51% attack ourselves, essentially, in terms of membership within a quite reasonable time frame of a few months. And we picture the friend on the Discord as a bit of the short list for the people that are could be or potential association member, and so have a direct impact on how the association evolves, the decision it makes, and essentially own the collective in a way where we won't be in majority anymore, we the board member, and so we'll be more in this executive mission. But without ability to single-handedly define what happens at the collective level. So it's a bit like a DeFi protocol at the end of the day. Right now we are in the multi-sig phase. Trust us, Pro, it's going to be right. But it's a bit necessary to set up the things in place, make sure we have the minimal infrastructure so that as we onboard the member, the infrastructure is sturdy enough that even if we have I don't know, someone that is playing the long con with us, that is giving us a lot of support for the next 6 months. We onboard him as a member, and then he try to rug the collective one way or another, redirect it to support the projects he like. The structure is apt and able to stomach that and stay on course.
It sounds like you have a fairly high, maybe not high, but just I guess more rigorous barrier to entry, just in that you guys are looking for people to demonstrate that they're around for the long run and that they're value aligned. But I just to push back on that a little bit, I also think that I feel like I don't think we hear this as much these days, but the general moniker has always been decentralizing too early can be a hindrance to a protocol often. Obviously this isn't a protocol necessarily, but do you guys have any concerns that, if you get to that point in the next 6 months where the 3 of you guys aren't able to swing the majority anymore, do you envision that being a hindrance to your efficiency or to your decision making at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's why we are being very careful with who is considered for the association membership. And there are other ways to get involved that are less committing and less engaging for the people who are getting involved. So we also accept contributions and even donations if people are just sympathetic to the cause and want to support it. But we really think that the core team should be the core team. So board and association member should be well aligned on the vision of where this needs to go.
Yeah. What do you think protocols are going to be thinking of the DeFi collective now and in the future? Maybe some protocols who won't like you as much, maybe some protocols who will. Yeah. What do you think that kind of view is going to be in the next few months?
Yeah, no, that was interesting. So maybe something we haven't touched on yet is how we reach our self-sufficiency so quickly is thanks to initial donations from a handful of protocols that saw value in the collective missions and its purpose. So to recognize and thank them, let's quote them. So those include Maverick, Dyad, Cat in the Box, Liquidity, Retro Zero, and Diva in the current state. And what is interesting is, the discussions with protocol was sometimes very positive, sometimes quite disappointing, to be honest. So I could start with a pretty positive example, which was a discussion with the Retro and Zero team, where they really resonated quickly with the project. There wasn't a lot of selling the collective to them to do, because from the very idea they were on board pretty much. And especially they kind of deserve a special mention for the fact that they understood quickly that Retro and Zero is still powered by mutable contracts and a few other things that makes it fall outside the scope of the collective. and they decided to support the collective anyway. So it was really like a purely altruistic behavior on their end, and I truly thank them for that. On the other end, we reach out to quite few big prominent DeFi teams, and essentially the first question was, what's in it for me? And when they understood that it wasn't necessarily something for them because they were too big or they weren't falling within protocol guidelines, not interested, go fuck yourself. So I was quite sad to see that, this lack of ability to project themselves a bit further and understand that a project like the collective is working to push the whole DeFi towards a higher quality of protocols, of standards, and so on, and that big protocols would essentially benefit from the collective succeeding, even if they're not within the collective guidelines. But I think it's more also a matter of proving ourselves, demonstrating the overall concept of the collective. And I hope so that the protocols who told us to go look somewhere else would be more willing to consider how they can support the collective maybe 6 months, a year from now, as we achieve sizable results.
Yeah. I think if you want to name drop some of those protocols, I would be interested to hear. But I think I could guess. You can guess which ones those were.
You'll have
I feel
to
like
guess.
it's a general thing. I feel like
Wait, Ellie, do you have a guess?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah. Do you have a guess? Do you have a guess?
No, I don't have a guess, but I think if you look at probably like somewhere between 70 to 80 of DeFi projects, I would say they probably could fall into that bucket. Like it or not, like we have a lot of like transactional people in the space. Not that it's a bad thing. It just, it's not really in line with the whole like, wag me good vibes type of stuff that you might think. And it's also not conducive to something like the DeFi collective, even though the collective is, in the long run likely going to be a net positive for that project anyways. They're not going to, if there isn't a clear value add for them from day one, they aren't going to give you the time of day. Like, I think, I don't know, I've dealt with that a lot specifically just because, I used to do a lot of like cold reaching out to people, just trying to make connections. And if there is no value add right away, you're lucky to even get a response. So when you talk about a whole organization looking for stuff like that, I'd imagine it's going to be some tough sledding, but it's also a good filter, I think, because when you do have people who get back to you, that it's, that they're not motivated by something that's financially motivated or motivated by some value add to their project. It's more so they see the vision, I think, which is really cool. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was just about to say, and for a fair share of those protocols or team that weren't interested in supporting the collective, we will eventually take them through the sideways, essentially by, once we have a track record and we've established ourselves a little bit more, I'll make sure to petition their DAO very actively and intensively to offer the community to support what is best for DeFi. And I believe the community will be much more wise than the team of said projects and probably more inclined to support the collective, especially with a proven track record. So I'm not losing faith in this, And even the big ones, like if we think about Uniswap, they splurged like $25 million on the DeFi education fund that provided very minimal track record, close to no results. So I believe, we can go with a serious ask to the Uniswap DAO maybe a year from now, because we'll have a serious track record, highly documented, public, auditable. And, why not ask for $5 million worth in Uni token so we can scale up the activities? Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, even if they aren't aligned from where you guys are right now, once you start to build up that track record and show how impactful you can be, I think that it's going to be really tough for them to be able to sway their community onto their side if they're against whatever you guys are pushing for. So I feel like ants is a pretty good metaphor. Then you can be, you can obviously work together and have these emergent properties, but you can also be kind of annoying to these protocols who need to be to be put in their place, for lack of a better term. I'm curious as to if we talked a little bit about some of the projects you're planning on supporting, and I think you did a good job explaining. You did a good job explaining kind of what makes an ideal candidate for you guys. What are some projects who you are particularly bullish on in the longer run that you feel are already kind of past that stage, that may not need your help necessarily? Some stuff that, some infrastructure, some protocols that you're a fan of just for the sake of what they are.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess Uniswap is a great example here. They already flew very far and they don't need our help. But the thing is, Uniswap is a bit of an oddity. You have a few others that have seen sizable success too, with similar level of resilience. I don't know, I'm thinking of something like Curve Finance, for instance. But there are some verticals where it's really not as exciting. If you think of stablecoins, for instance, all the big ones are very far from resilience and straying farther and farther away from it as time goes. I'm looking at you, Maker. Or they were never resilient to begin with and are just worsening the resilience level as time goes. Looking at you, Frax. In that vertical, we understand that we'll have a bit of work to do. And it's really a matter of more making sure we can support emergent stable coins, because in terms of live one, not a lot of them are actually building for resilience or were built for resilience because they're already live. It really depends of the vertical. Some of them are more like tools to the collective. So, to go back to the example of DEXs, we already have big, well-funded, resilient DEXs. So for us, we see them more as tools we're going to use to support protocols in other verticals where we don't have, the Uniswap equivalent of a stable coin or, the Uniswap equivalent of a perp exchange in terms of resilience. So that's what we're looking to have emerge.
Yeah, it seems like you and your team have an idea of what needs fixing at the very least, and what needs supporting. Do you envision some kind of stamp from the collective being formed, almost like a certification by you guys happening on the validity of a protocol? Because speaking to you now, we could go for another hour on which protocols make that checklist and which ones don't. From your opinion, I think it would be very interesting to hear that. Do you think that's something you'll start putting out more in the future?
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's a bit of the longer term vision for those protocol guidelines I was telling you about earlier that are right now internal. So that's kind of how we see it. Is first, share them more broadly, and then maybe formalize them, objectify them in a way that can really be like a bit of a checklist where we can evaluate a given protocol against. And exactly that. Deliver that stamp from the ends, essentially. And this has an interesting angle. So first, again, in our perspective, it explicit to the broader public which protocol we support and not, and what are the reasons we're not supporting a given protocol that they might like and think is good, because we don't want this to be a political decision. It's not because they're our friends or we like them. It's really based on technical specifications at the end of the day. But the stamp from the ends, if we can keep going like that, we believe it would have a lot of value for other type of actors. So I had a few conversations in like the exploratory call for the collective with asset managers, for instance, that expressed a lot of interest in that stamp for the ends, because for them, they see it as a kind of pre-filter that they would use for their customers that are the less degen, essentially, the one that want to have safe and robust strategies. They will probably be more interested in the protocol that are stamped by the end, because at the end of the day, all guidelines are really directly correlated to the risk the protocol is posing to the user's funds that are stored in there or involved in there.
And for the guidelines, do you see them as like a constitution of sorts? Is that going to be like released at some point?
Oh yeah, that's the vision to not only release them but involve the community a bit more in refining them. So again, right now we have internal guidelines and we are formalizing them a bit more and looking at the best way to get the community involved in the process. But we really want to build them collaboratively, essentially, because again, we want to make sure everybody understand that they are designed for essentially picking the most resilient protocol and not with the perspective of political or supporting friends or whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. I think we're just about at time here. We wanna start to wrap up. Just as like one last closing question here, if or I guess like if there's any call to actions from your end for any audience members watching who might be interested, how can they go ahead and start to get involved or start to, I guess, like what can they expect to see from you guys, or anything else that you might want to share?
Yeah, sure. So if you like the vision and the project, often in DeFi, the best place to follow the heartbeat is on the Discord. This is also where you will figure out how to get involved and be able to chat with us directly. Regarding like the next steps, I guess, as I was saying, we have our public treasury reporting that will be coming up eventually. So we started activity about 2 weeks ago. So it gives us another roughly, mid-November, about 6 weeks before we reach. We're going to report on them likely monthly. So, we need a full month of activity plus a month's delay. So that's why we're aiming for mid-November for that first report. I believe it will make some eyes pop because people will realize that, supporting immutable protocols can also be a very profitable activity. And that's a bit of the whole vision of the collective, is scaling up that snowball of support for protocols. And even in how we manage our treasury, even for the DJs out there, when they would see the performance, they would realize that, we probably obliterate all of their performance, only harnessing the most resilient protocols in DeFi. So like you can do the right thing and make a lot of money in the process. So why are you spending your time supporting multi-sig powered Ponzinomics instead of, trying to walk the talk, you too, with your wallets? It's kind of like the vision we want to promote in the longer term. So yeah, get on the Discord. This is where you'll get all the news. And if you want to support us, feel free to introduce yourself. We have a channel for that on the Discord. Let us know as to what you'd be interested in doing. We're really open as to how people can get involved. And it doesn't have to be, a significant long-term commitment. Of course, we have this in mind for the association's members we were discussing about, but we're also open and welcoming of more punctual assistance on any given topic.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely. I think I just joined the Discord earlier this week, but I'll definitely be seeing if I can be a bit more active in there. It's definitely something I'm interested in personally. Yeah, I think that about takes us to time here. Really appreciate you coming on, Brice. This was a lot of fun. Definitely really interesting to see you guys from such an early stage. Really, just like a week post going public. I think that's like the earliest we've ever spoken to a team.
Yeah.
So it'll definitely be really exciting to watch you guys grow, watch you guys build up that track record, and just help to push the space forward. Definitely something I'm excited for.
Awesome. Yes. Thanks
Yeah.
for having me in the podcast. Really appreciate you guys hosting us this early.
Yeah,
And
this is awesome. We thank a lot of people who are building projects just for us to randomly commentate on and interview, but you're building something a lot with a greater vision. So we really appreciate your work in the space and building the collective. That is episode 41. Thanks for coming, Brice, and thanks for everybody who tuned in.